Welcome to the Andy Staples Show, Coach Ranking Edition. We come to the final episode of our Power 5 conference by conference job rankings. And we didn't intend to do this when we started it. We got a great question from a listener who wanted us to rank the ACC jobs and said, use the criteria of over the next 5 years, what are the best jobs? And Ari and I thought it was a really interesting question, and we did the ACC, and everybody's like, can you do the other leagues? So we're doing them. And we've done the Big Ten, we've done the SEC. Ari, today we've got the Big 12 and the Pac-12. We got a twofer because, listen, I realize this is a football show, but a week from now, all we're going to be talking about is the NCAA tournament. And we are the perfect people to guide you through the NCAA tournament coming off Selection Sunday because we don't know anything either.
Okay, because I was going to say, do I have to spend the next week reading about college basketball? Because right now, I'm not sure I could name 15 players.
I want you to know as little as possible because that makes it a more interesting show. So
I think it's a good segue into this one because I thought that these were the hardest two conferences to rank, and which means people are going to get the angriest. And also, I could talk for the bottom 7 of the Big 12 for 7 hours. So it's going to be kind of a battle for us to get through this in an hour. So I think we should get started.
the thing of it is, at least with me, like there's one near the bottom of the Big 12 that where it is ranked is a massive compliment to the guy who has the job, essentially. But it will tick off the fan base, even though all I'm doing is saying the person who has it now is awesome. But whatever. But you're right. The Big 12
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. The Big 12 for me was 1 and 2 were easy. And deciding which was 1 and which was 2 for me was easy.
Yeah.
And everybody else was tough. So
I agree with you. Yeah. So let's start.
Let's start at the top. Ari, did you have Oklahoma or Texas number 1?
Texas, without thinking about it.
Oh, I had Oklahoma without thinking about it. Because we're talking about the next 5 years. The same issues. Actually, let's go back to the SEC rankings where we had Texas A&M because we had some mad Texas A&M fans on Twitter this past week that said, "How could you rank it below the?" And then they list 5 schools that have played for the national title since 2008, and I'm like, "Well, that's how." So my thing with Oklahoma and Texas, what is Texas's problem? Alignment. What does Oklahoma have better than anybody else? Alignment. Oklahoma. Everyone there makes the football coach's job easier. That they understand that that's what they're there for. Texas, they don't get that. And that's why, despite all of the resources they have at Texas, I put them number 2.
Despite everything that's gone wrong at Texas, they're still a more physically talented team than Oklahoma. And if you look right now at the recruiting class that Sark is putting together in 2022, like less than 3 months on the job, he's already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 100 players committed. Like Texas has the ability to be a recruiting juggernaut, and Texas, in theory, could one day be Alabama with the right person in charge. Like Texas has higher potential to be the best thing in college football than Oklahoma does. Because
Oklahoma keeps doing it.
And still, trust me, Oklahoma's a better football program right now. But if we're ranking jobs, I think
for the next 5 years, Oklahoma will be the best one for the next 5 years too.
I think that the second it clicks at Texas, Oklahoma's in second place. Okay. I think the second that it goes that, I think 5 years from now, it could be a completely different conversation.
We're still waiting for Texas to click.
I know, I get it. But Texas is the state school, and the school that's expected to get the best players in the state of Texas. And that is a unique situation. And I understand it's probably the most competitive state, or one of the 3 most competitive states in college football to recruit. And I understand that for whatever reason, things just aren't working there. But the entire idea of being the head coach of one of these jobs is that it's your job to make things functional and make things right. So right now, Oklahoma is certainly way ahead of Texas based on the performance standpoint and the program stability standpoint. There's no doubt about that. And I understand that we're doing this for the next 5 years. But if Sark recruits classes like this one, for 4 or 5 years in a row, it would be the craziest thing in the world if it continues. And I know I know you're already flaring your eyes up at me. I know.
Did Texas not have highly ranked recruiting classes at any point over the last 10 years?
Yeah, they've had pretty good recruiting classes for sure.
Okay.
They were the 5th most talented team in college football. And they had the number 3 class in 2019. I get it. I don't know what the problem is there. And I think that the idea
and that's why they're number 2. If you can't figure out the problem, it's the same reason why I have Texas A&M below those other 5 schools in the SEC. Because if you just rank all the stuff that we usually rank this on, proximity to recruits, resources, money, everything else, they have everything. Texas is the same situation, except maybe even better. And they can't put it together. And you can't put your finger on why. Yet Oklahoma, all they do is continue to succeed. There's something to be said for that.
How big of a gap do you think there is between Texas and Oklahoma right now, honestly?
Not well, here's the thing.
When
you see them on the field, it's not that big. But the problem is there is a gap. There is a gap in program quality because the difference between Texas and Oklahoma is Texas plays up and plays Oklahoma close and then loses to TCU all the time or loses to teams they're not supposed to lose to. When Oklahoma gets beat, it's because it's a well-coached team playing really well. Like they lost to Iowa State last year. They lost to K-State the past 2 years. Okay, those are well-coached teams that played crazy good games against Oklahoma.
I think that you could make the argument that Oklahoma is, a full step better, but the gap between the two on the field isn't as wide as the country thinks. And I think Oklahoma...
the gap is in the coaching and in terms of program in the alignment. I'm telling you, being the coach at Oklahoma is easier than being the coach at Texas because Joe Castiglione, the AD, and they've got a new president now, but they had David Boren for basically the entirety of the time that Bob Stoops was there. They're going to work to make your job easier. I don't think you could say the same thing for the administration in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and you have a good point. My only thing with this is A, I would rather be the state school in Texas, and B, I would rather be at that program from a resources standpoint. Not that Oklahoma doesn't have it, and B or C, when this thing takes off, if and when it takes off, it is the potential here is untapped. It's dysfunctional, and still, it's not that big of a difference between Oklahoma. Like it's like buying. Do you want to buy a stock that's going to increase 7% a year no matter what? Because that's the stock that is going to incrementally increase, or do you want to get one that has boom or bust mentality, but is a solid company? Like that's the difference here. It's almost like the type of investor that you are, and it's like I like 7% with compound interest over the course of decades. That's going to get you there every time. But I also like the idea of a place that has every single possible college football resource that is on the cusp of going through the roof. And as it underperforms is really not all that different than Oklahoma. Oklahoma's lost 2 or 3 or 4 more. I mean, Texas has lost 2 or 3 or 4 more games total than Oklahoma in the past 4 years or something like that. And Oklahoma has made it to the playoff, and you've seen all but one game become. I think Texas and Oklahoma are very similar. And if I wanted to start for the next 5 years right now, again, Oklahoma's got so many quarterbacks, you can't even keep track of them. But like Texas to me is, at least even 5 or 10 years ago, one of the best jobs in college football. I mean, like Texas is huge. I don't know why it doesn't work. I don't know why it hasn't.
And
but
that's
the reason
the
why
problem. You don't know why it doesn't work.
The reason why I'm going with it doesn't work is because the coaches were wrong and those coaches were fired. Like anybody, like how long would it take for Nick Saban to win a national championship in Texas?
Longer than it did at Alabama.
Do you think it would take 3 years if he started right now?
Yeah. Yeah, because look, Alabama's aligned. Alabama, everybody's pulling in the same direction. When Texas does that, it'll be the first time. Like it's like I believe it was DeLoss Dodds who talked about putting the BBs back in the box. Like for whatever reason, they can't.
But how much of that is the coach's responsibility, do you think?
Some, but not all.
Like percentage wise?
50.
So you think that like administration and boosters and all the other stuff that comes along with it?
I think all of that matters 50%
of the reason, 50% of the reason they're not winning?
Yes. Might even be more than 50.
Yeah. I think that the percentage might be 75-25 coaching.
Like, even a replacement level coach should be able to win 9 games a year at Texas.
Because I think that you could make the argument too, Andy, that Oklahoma's peaked. Like, this is it. Like, I don't know, until Oklahoma starts signing classes like Texas, I don't think that they'll ever be able to beat Alabama and win a national championship. Like, Texas is more equipped, and, based on our discussion
Oklahoma,
last week.
We've discussed this a million times. Oklahoma is elite defensive linemen away from being able to actually compete for a national title. And they don't have that. And the teams that compete for national titles do.
I think that you could say that Texas has a better roster to compete for a national title, and the only thing that Oklahoma has done is had, and it's not a small thing, it's a big thing, but they've had superior quarterback play. But from top to bottom roster-wise, Oklahoma and Texas are built very similarly, and like I think you could make the argument that Texas is closer to winning a national title than Oklahoma is.
I would not make that argument. I would like to see Texas win the Big 12 for the first time since 2009 before I even come close to making that argument. You know who else has won the Big 12 since 2009? Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Not Texas.
It's a pretty crazy, and I think we're going to get into this more as we go down, Andy, but like it's like, even from a gambling standpoint, it's such a hard conference to peg from Saturday to Saturday or big picture wise.
Oh,
and it's like,
yeah.
And as we're doing the series from conference to conference, we come across teams where it's like, I don't know why it doesn't work. Like Texas A&M was the one last week. And it's just like, maybe it's something in the state of Texas. I don't know.
I think you discount I don't know why it doesn't work. And I consider I don't know why it doesn't work to be a major impediment.
I consider the coach's job to figure that out. And I think great coaches, and, Sark had his ups and downs in the past, but great coaches are the ones who solve those problems and win national championships. In Texas, for the past, since Mac Brown hasn't had a great coach, right? And still, even with all the dysfunction and all the coaching turnover and everything that's gone wrong there from an administration standpoint, they've still been pretty comparable to one of the best programs in college football, which is Oklahoma. Like, imagine the second that the light bulb goes on. And like, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll go another 100 years and the light bulb will never come on.
The thing you've got to remember is, as good as Mac Brown was there, Oklahoma was still better that entire time. They both won one national title, but Oklahoma won a hell of a lot more Big 12 titles.
Yeah. Oklahoma has always been more successful, and I think that's very interesting. I do.
And that's why in terms of like number one.
Like, what job would I want to take right now? And like, proximity to talent is always going to be my thing. And yes, Norman is like, what, 90 minutes away from Dallas? Like, I get that they're...
It's more like 2.5. But you get the Arbuckle Mountain Pie Company where you can get the hand pies. I mean,
there's also like 3 casinos
just
on the
drive. Casinos. I'm recruiting linemen, Ari. I'm working with pies here.
You ever been to a casino pavé, pal?
They don't have the hand pies. They don't have apricot hand pies. I guarantee you that. Okay, so we got to get to the rest of the Big 12 because
15 minutes in, we're at 2.
Very hard. Very, very hard after these two because we knew Kansas was 10, and we'll talk about Kansas and what's going on there right now later. But between 3 and 9, it was rough.
Can mine 3 just be, I don't know?
It has, well, you have to have somebody there. And I put somebody there. And I fell back on our old, reliable proximity to talent.
Okay.
And went with TCU.
Okay, mine was Oklahoma State.
Okay.
And mine is just because their facilities are outrageous. You could make an argument that Oklahoma State, though kind of in the middle of nowhere of Oklahoma, is also got very good, advantageous geography. And it doesn't have the word Texas in its team name. But of course, the thing with this whole conference, man, is that they all recruit the same area.
Yeah.
I think Mike Gundy's done a very good
job. I mean, Mike Gundy has done better than anybody else historically at Oklahoma State. That's the thing. I rank them down. It's not like if you said who are the best programs right now in the league, it would go Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, and maybe not even in that order. But in terms of what's the best job, if you could get the TCU job or the Oklahoma State job, which would you take if they're paying the same?
Probably Oklahoma State.
Okay, I would
that's
take
why
TCU
I ranked them higher.
Just to be in DFW.
TCU is my 4, if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, I had Baylor 4. Another proximity thing. I had Oklahoma State 5, but I honestly consider all 3 of them pretty similar jobs.
Baylor's my 5, and the reason why Baylor was my 5 was just because it's right in the middle of Texas. It's like right in the middle. It's kind of, and it's a pretty big town. So like Waco's pretty large place.
Waco's barbecue scene has just exploded in the last few years. You got
recruit linemen.
That's very important. Very, very important. And if you want to renovate your house, you got Chip and Joe right there. That's pretty important too. But no, I kind of look at those 3 in a similar vein in that they are recruiting very much the same players. TCU and Baylor are closer to those players, but Oklahoma State probably a little more historically successful, at least, or recently successful. Yeah.
Honestly, we could just switch lists and I would be fine with your list.
Well, but my thing with Oklahoma State is if you take Mike Gundy out of it and put a replacement level coach in there, I don't know that they are better than TCU and Baylor.
They got T-Boone money.
They do, but TCU and Baylor got money too. I mean, they both just rebuilt stadiums in a massive economic downturn, and there's money. There's money to be had. If you're a school in Texas, there's money to be had.
Yeah. I honestly could slide Oklahoma State to 6 on my list and not. I mean, I just thought it was so difficult.
So six is where it gets even weirder for me.
Okay, who'd you have?
I had West Virginia 6th.
Okay. West Virginia is a little bit lower on my list. I pushed up Iowa State. And I guess I'm going to be kind of a hypocrite right now. I don't know if this is because they've got one of the best head coaches and one of the best recruiting staffs in the entire country to bump them up higher. I have a feeling they're going to be lower on your list, but then them being lower on your list is a compliment to how great they've been. 100%. Let me just start by saying that I've been absolutely blown away by what that program has been able to accomplish from a talent evaluation standpoint, but also an on-the-field accomplishment standpoint. Because sometimes you have one and the other. They've got both. And
yeah, but you're making the case for that not being a great job. But that's just a bunch of great people in their jobs right now.
And what I was trying to get at is that maybe the great people at the place right now are making me rank them higher than it is.
Well, okay. Let's say. We'll flip it. Let's say they coach at Texas Tech instead of they coach at Iowa State. I think they would accomplish the same things at Texas Tech as they would at Iowa State.
Yeah, and Texas Tech
and maybe easier.
Texas Tech is my 7, and Lubbock is out in the middle of nowhere, but it's also got like a ton of people there, and it's a city, right? So like,
well, and there's Amarillo, and you can still drive there from Dallas. I mean, it's a long way from Houston and Austin and San Antonio, but the populated parts of North Texas, it's not as bad to get to. But West Virginia, for me, I want to talk about that a little bit because it's a weird spot. You're not recruiting from the same pool of players as the rest of the league. You're basically fighting the bottom of the ACC for players. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I think if you do it right, you can get some guys from Florida, you can get guys from Pennsylvania, you can get guys from up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I mean, they did well with guys from Delaware when they had Sills, and they got the transfer from Kenny Bigelow after he was at USC for a while. But I mean, they've got pretty rich recruiting grounds around them, even though they're never going to be number one on anybody's list.
So I really want to go into West Virginia, and I will. My number 8. But first, I wanted to make a point about Iowa State that I didn't make, just so people have an understanding of why I put it there. Iowa State, if you go look at their 2021 class, got kids out of Ohio, Colorado, Missouri, Texas, Iowa, Arizona, Florida, and Illinois. And like the fact that there are some Ohio ties with the head coach, might have something to do with it. But Iowa State, despite not having the geography, I think you could say has recruited the best nationally. As you know, not outside
I would
of
say
Texas
if
and
Matt
Oklahoma.
Campbell's not there, none of those people are playing for them.
But I also too wonder sometimes, and this happens when successful coaches leave, if blueprints for success can be followed. The hardest thing for me is
can
at
you
least
be
for
Wisconsin?
a coach. A coach has one job. Or two different jobs, right? One is coaching and one is recruiting. And a lot of coaches aren't good at both or aren't great at both, which is why there aren't a lot of Nick Sabans hanging around. But if there's somebody who comes before you who can define a strategy and a philosophy that works and outlines it for you and proves that it works, then half the job is already done when you take over because you already have that plan in place.
Here's my thing. I don't think Iowa State's that type. There's no formula for what Matt Campbell's doing. He's not formulaic. He takes what he's got and creates a bespoke scheme offensively to take advantage of that. And then what Haycock's done on defense is nothing short of brilliant because every team in America has stolen something from them.
Yeah, it's like possible that like Iowa State is just number 8 and they are incredible. I don't know, if that's something that it's just being able to evaluate talent and then develop that talent. Because what are they? They were like.
I think there's a blueprint program in the league. It's just not Iowa State.
Who's your blueprint program? Just say it. Come on, rub it in.
Kansas State.
Okay, but first let's do West Virginia because I didn't get to West Virginia. West Virginia is so low on my list because I think it's the most out of place team in any conference in college football.
No question.
Like it doesn't make any sense to me how, from a geographic standpoint, they can't recruit the same state that everybody else recruits, or at least they might attempt to. You can't drive to a single away game if you're a family member, so you can't see your kids play. All the states that you mentioned that West Virginia is attempting to recruit, they aren't the number one dog in any of those states. West Virginia has no talent in high school football for the most part. Right. It tries to recruit Ohio, but what are they, 5th or 6th in Ohio when it comes to the talent there?
Ohio is not the they've got to be able to pipeline into Florida, which they've done successfully at times. They need to be able to Eastern Seaboard. They need to be able to recruit the DMV area pretty well. They need to be able to recruit Pennsylvania well. I mean, clearly they're an hour from Pittsburgh, so Western PA they need to be able to recruit. I would say you got to be able to try to get some guys out of Jersey, and that's how you succeed.
I mean, think about that recruiting plan, though. That is insane.
And the problem with it is you're going in there and saying, "Yeah, you guys excited about playing Oklahoma State and Texas and Texas Tech?" And these kids who grew up watching Penn State and Virginia Tech and Clemson and Florida, and they were like, "Huh? Who? Where?"
I think you can make the case that West Virginia has the most hurdles from a geographical standpoint. Well, we'll get to the Pac-12 here in a minute. But
I will say that the odd geography could be a sort of advantage if it's used properly. Because
I don't think odd geography is ever an advantage.
I think you can be different than the rest of the league.
Because what you just outlined for them to do is really, really hard. Well, they can dip into Jersey and dip into Florida and dip in. I mean, that's like a really hard plan.
Or they can fight over the same Texas kids that Oklahoma, Texas, TCU, and Baylor and Oklahoma State don't want.
Which is also
that's what all these other ones are doing.
They don't have a good plan.
That's what all the other ones are doing.
But they have a bad plan because they don't have a good plan, which is why they're number 8 on my list.
Okay. Well, I had West Virginia 6, Texas Tech 7.
Yep.
I had K-State 8 because I do think there's a blueprint there. And I think they messed up the first time Bill Snyder retired. Ron Prince did not want to follow the blueprint. It didn't work, so they brought Bill Snyder back. I think Chris Kleiman is following the blueprint, and I think he can make that program. They're probably never going to be consistently great, but they're going to be solid. They're going to be a tough out. They're going to be the team that everybody hates to play every single time.
And what's the blueprint?
The blueprint is judiciously recruit out of the JCs, but not overdo it. You saw Charlie Weiss overdo it at Kansas and what that can cause. And then evaluate great, develop, play seniors, play juniors and seniors. You're getting guys, you have to have a great evaluating staff, but you're getting guys who are probably not dealing with a lot of other Power 5 offers or any other Power 5 offers, and so therefore are going to be willing to work and develop for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they just got a pretty talented quarterback named Jake Rubley. I wrote about him. And he was a top 150 player. I don't know if he's been re-ranked since, but if you get the right quarterback and then you kind of mesh that together, I think it's possible to do something. And it's just like,
Colin,
you know what, Andy?
Colin Klein is a great example of that.
Right. I think that the thing that I would take away from the Big 12, and maybe more so than any other conference, they seem, outside of West Virginia, to be the most stacked on top of each other from a location standpoint. But I feel like all these places, with the right coach and the right plan and the right execution of that plan, can win big. And I think that's why we've seen Baylor contend for a national championship.
Right.
That's why we've seen TCU. Oklahoma State's been good.
I haven't mentioned Iowa State. I haven't mentioned Iowa State, and they played for the league title last year.
Yeah. Did you put them at 9?
I had them at 9. I think it's a very hard job. I think what Matt Campbell has done there is extraordinary. I think he has done an incredible job there, because I was just look at it on a map. Okay, you're really in Big Ten country. You're asking the kids from Texas to go as far in the Big 12 as they can go, except for West Virginia, and West Virginia's probably not recruiting them. It's a big ask. You have to be able to find players. You have to be able to trust your evaluation. And I think that's what they've done so great at, is they are just brilliant evaluators. The way they got Brock Purdy is a prime example of that. Just understanding that they had some connections in Phoenix. One of their recruiting staffers was a Phoenix guy, and was like, hey, this dude who's smashed every record in Phoenix has one offer, and it's from Boise State. Y'all might want to jump in on him. And then Matt Campbell takes it the rest of the way, because Brock Purdy could have gone to Texas A&M. He actually could have gone to Alabama. He could have gone to UCF, but it was Matt Campbell that closed that deal. That's why they have Brock Purdy. And you talked about the places they're getting players from. That's because people want to play for Matt Campbell. You talk to him for 5 minutes and you want to play for him.
Yeah, the thing about Ames is that it's 30 miles away from a major city, or the biggest city,
right?
Maybe
It is
Iowa.
Close to Des Moines. Yeah, and the thing is, like, people back Des Moines is a really nice town. So that part of it, I don't look at Ames as being super remote. I don't think that's really the problem, but it is remote in terms of proximity to players.
There's not a ton of players in Iowa, but it's close to Omaha. It's close to Des Moines. It's every bit as manageable to recruit out of Chicago as it is for Iowa. But you can recruit.
Are you going to go to Iowa or Iowa State?
I don't know. The thing that I like about Iowa State, and the reason why it partially was a little bit higher on my list, is because Iowa State can recruit Big 12 players and Big 10 players. It's close enough to Big 10 players where you can have access to the location of it, but you can also sell all the kids in Texas and Oklahoma and all the other ones in between and playing in the conference. And it's like, if you actually take a step back and look at the potential in terms of access to players that Iowa State has from just a geographical strategy standpoint, I think you could say that Iowa State is the best off of all the teams outside of the ones that have Texas in their name. And Oklahoma.
But the problem, it's sort of like the West Virginia thing, but where do they fall on the list of those schools? Because you've got Iowa there, you've got Nebraska there, you've got Minnesota there, and look, Nebraska's down. Minnesota had one good year a couple years ago, but Ferentz is putting dudes in the NFL on the regular. So that's a tough thing to turn down. And the other problem is, if the kid's good enough, watch out for the Buckeyes. They may be coming in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, watch out for the Badgers. Watch out for the Wolverines. They're coming in too. So that's the other problem there. But no, I understand where you're coming from. I just think I think you look historically, Iowa State has been a brutally tough place to win games. And Matt Campbell and his staff have done an extraordinary job. I think it's a hard job that they are doing incredibly well.
And they might have just been have done such a good job that it makes me feel like it's more manageable. And I can own up to that. I also know that like the thing that they've done the best is that they've picked their spots perfectly, like the Brock Purdy anecdote that you just gave. And I reread your story, Valley of the Quarterbacks, recently because I was writing something about quarterbacks, and it's just like that is recruiting at its finest. Finding an advantageous person to recruit and then attacking that. And Iowa State isn't going up against Ohio State and Michigan for players. They're identifying players in those same regions that are being overlooked by the big teams that don't have room for those players, getting those really good players and then turning them into studs. And it's like Iowa State, I actually would want to look this up, Andy. A team that played for a conference championship, and maybe Northwestern has done this a few times too, but the lowest ranked teams in the 247 composite blue chip ratio rankings to play for a conference championship. I think that Iowa State was in the
Virginia
60s.
A couple of years ago. Duke in 2013 would probably be on that list.
Yeah. It's just remarkable. I can't say it enough.
That's my thing. If that's not Matt Campbell trying to close that player coming to your school, I'm not sure you get him. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And so we'll see. Now, my number 10 was your number 10, Kansas, and obviously that has been in the news. I would suspect that Kansas is going to move on from Les Miles. You know, the stuff that came out of LSU is really gross, and let's be honest, he hasn't won enough for them to even think about defending him on this.
Yeah, it's just a difficult situation, but you know, whatever was in that report, we all read it. I mean, it was a tough stuff to read, and you know, you can't do that stuff. There's no excuse for it.
If you're not allowed to be around college students, you probably shouldn't work on a college campus. Like that's just all there is to it. So,
yeah.
And then if you're Kansas, I mean, you've got to figure out if you're Kansas is, do you want to, obviously you want to get rid of Les Miles. You probably want to try to fire him for cause if you can. Can you also fire Jeff Long for cause for not properly vetting Les Miles? Because I think that's the other thing you would want to do, because Jeff Long's $1.5 million a year, and his contract automatically extends if any of their programs go on NCAA probation. Well, guess what? Their basketball team's pretty embroiled in that FBI case. There's a good chance they could go on probation at some point in the next couple of years, at which point Jeff Long automatically extends. So do you want to pay that guy $1.5 million a year for the next 4 years, for the next 5 years? I don't think you do. So you try to figure that out, and then, you know, go try to hire somebody who might actually be able to win there, which is another story entirely.
And like somebody in his position should have been able to find out those things.
Well,
you know, this wasn't
the hiring of Les Miles was a bad hire all along. And this isn't revisionist history. You can go back and listen to all the radio shows I did. You can read what I wrote. I was not impressed with this hire at all. I thought this was Jeff Long going, I'm going to hire someone the boosters have heard of, and maybe that will increase donations. It was an incredibly short-sighted way to hire a football coach.
Yeah, and I think that it's not just Kansas. I think a lot of schools do this, where they just decide, hey, which is the most recognizable name out there? Yeah. Let's give him a shot to give people hope.
They took the guy who got fired because he wasn't winning enough with LSU talent. And you're going to give him like the most not LSU talent and expect him to win? You don't hire an underachiever for that job.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's something when we get to the Pac-12 we'll talk about, because schools in the Pac-12 have done the same thing. And it's just like, to me, I would always err on hiring somebody who is on his way up, not on his way down. That's kind of that would be my philosophy if I were an athletic director.
Let's get to the Pac-12, because this is one where I had a hard time. Also, the number one job felt pretty easy for me, and then it got a little more difficult. Obviously, well, we wouldn't want to live in Berkeley. Those down the line jobs are kind of tough to deal with too.
Last time you said that it was a no-brainer at the number one spot, I just thought you were going to say Texas too, so you kind of blindsided me there a little bit. Are we both at USC on this one? Or are we? We're
on the same page here. Yeah, USC is the best job. I'm not sure Clay Helton has been maximizing.
Because listen, you could make the same exact arguments,
job, but it's the best job.
You can make the same exact arguments about Oregon and USC as you can about Texas and Oklahoma.
But USC has worked. USC has won the league recently. I mean, Clay won the league at USC. Like,
yeah,
it's not. This is not quite the situation at Texas where you can't put your finger on what's going on.
They haven't won the league at Texas because the team that was better than them on the field has won the league a few times.
Well, there's a team that's better than USC on the field now. And in fact, there may be, I would say there are 3 programs that over the last few years, either all the time or at times have been better than USC on the field. And we're going to get to those 3 next. So, I think that's the interesting thing.
USC has tradition. It's won national championships. It's proximity to talent is unmatched.
Players. I mean, yeah.
It's just it's a no-brainer.
Right. You should win at USC. And it's not a case where it's like Texas where there's some sort of mysterious thing keeping you from it, or Texas A&M. There's no mysterious thing. Develop your linemen. You've got incredible skill talent. They currently have incredible skill talent. If they're better on the line of scrimmage, USC would dominate the Pac-12. That's all it is right now. So that's and guess what? Guess who has dominated the Pac-12 the last really since Chip Kelly left? In the post-Chip Kelly era in the Pac-12, the team that has dominated the line of scrimmage has dominated the Pac-12. Whether that's Stanford, Washington, or Oregon, that's who wins.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I did an anonymous survey with some national recruiting analysts that said that USC's 2021 class was maybe the most overrated in college football this year because it was a top 10 class that didn't have any linemen. And it was kind of like, here we go again. You know what I mean? And it's like
Clay just sort of playing to type, which is so weird because he's the son of an offensive line coach. Like, how does this happen? But Mario Cristobal has come in and gone, oh, Stanford dominated with great linemen, and then Washington became the best team in the league with great linemen. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to recruit great linemen. and sure enough, it seems to be. The other piece of this is Utah, where and we'll get to the let's do
this
the list.
This is hard.
So we both had USC 1. Who did you have 2?
Oregon.
I did 2. I feel like they've established a brand that can essentially
transcends.
Recruit nationally.
Yeah. They've gotten Oregon has done something that every other team in similar circumstances wants to do. And I don't know what the answer is. Is the answer just they have Nike money and that's it? Phil Knight, that's it? It's over? Or did Oregon do something? Was it the offense to go along with the uniforms? Was Chip Kelly?
It was the offense too. It was all of it happened at about the same time. I mean, I remember when they took the field at that Rose Bowl with the mirrored helmets. It's just like, oh my, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Come on.
And they've had cool uniforms since the Dennis Dixon days. Like, right. I mean, those guys, they've been.
I mean, really, once Kelly got there as the OC and Dennis Dixon, I think, does not get enough credit because unfortunately he got hurt and he really only had one season doing that and got hurt during that season. But Dennis Dixon in that offense was so cool and so exciting, and he made it must-see TV. And I think that, Joey Harrington and all that set the table, but the Dennis Dixon, Chip Kelly, and then you move into Masoli and then Mariota, and all of a sudden, it's just the coolest program, and that cool factor continues, even though they had a down year or two where they had to fire Mark Helfrich. But
they've risen above the geography.
Well, yeah, and Mario's reinvented them as a different kind of cool program. Now they're the kind of cool program that's going to whip your ass up front.
Yeah. You want to hear a fun fact about me? My second year at the student newspaper, Arizona, I was on the field 25 yards away from Dixon when he blew his knee out. Oh. And it was just like awful. It was just terrible because he was such a special talent.
I was covering Florida that year, and I remember when he got hurt, my editor called me. He's like, Tebow's probably going to win the Heisman now. And I was like, yeah, I got it. But I hate that it's like this because that guy was so much fun to watch. I was sitting in my bedroom watching that game like, no, get up, come on. And it was just, it was awful. But yes, Oregon has transcended geography. They just have. And, everybody wants to do that. And, Notre Dame, you understand why. Yeah, as you put it so eloquently, every Catholic school in America, every Catholic high school in America is a Notre Dame embassy. Oregon doesn't have that. Oregon has, everybody thinks it's cool. And for, they've been able to make people continue to think it's cool.
And last week when we talked about cool schools, like the cool schools, like at the opening and amongst the best recruits, I don't think Oregon is in that top 5 yet, but Oregon is right there on the cusp of it. And Oregon's 2021 class was the best class in program history. I mean, I think they had 10 or 11, 12, 13. I don't know the exact number, but it was double digits, top 150 players in their class. And they're starting to recruit now like a national title contender. Now, they're still 3, 4, 5 steps behind programs like Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia with the amount of talent they've put. But for the Pac-12, this team should be reigning supreme. And if we're like buying stock right now in any of the schools, like USC is a better job, but Oregon is going to be better for the next 5 years than USC. Based on what's happening right now.
If USC had Mario Cristobal coaching it, they'd be
would be over. Yeah,
they'd be an absolute monster. So I had Washington third.
Me too.
Because you're in a big city, a cool big city. There is some talent there. They don't always get it, but there is some talent there. And it's another brand where it's pretty cool, and they care a lot about football, which in that part of the country, that counts for something. When you bring a recruit on campus and they see how much it matters, there's not a lot of other campuses where it matters that much.
Yeah. I've never been to Washington. That's the only one of 2 Pac-12 stadiums I've never been to. But I heard it's like one of the coolest stadiums in college football.
It's awesome. It's so awesome.
And Seattle all of a sudden is turning out to be one of the best cities in America. Maybe a top 10 city in America for talent. They had 3 top 10 national players in the city of Seattle last year.
It is really amazing how that works. I mean, I guess Seattle has periods like that. The early 90s, it was Mother Love Bone to Nirvana to Pearl Jam, and then now it's football players. So, but you're right. And if Washington can take advantage of that, then they can continue to be at the top of the Pac-12. I think Jimmy
The problem is that they didn't. That's the problem. There was 3 top 10 national players in the 2021 class. One was a quarterback, and he went to Washington, which you could argue is the most important one.
That's Heward.
But the other, Sam Heward, and the other 2, Emeka Egbuka, who's enrolled at Ohio State, and then JT Tuimoloau, who might be the best defensive lineman in high school football. He's the number 2 player behind only Corey Foreman, and he's like down to Alabama, Ohio State, and a few others. And we're still waiting to hear what his decision is. But if he doesn't go to Washington, I don't anticipate that he will. You're talking about the nucleus of the future of your program in 3 players all in the city of Seattle, and getting only one just hurts. Because it's like, how many times is that going to happen again? And I don't know if Jimmy Lake just hasn't been there long enough, or if there's a disconnect between Washington and some of the high schools, because some of the really good talent in Seattle is leaving. I mean, I know G. Scott Jr. went to Ohio State 2 years ago, and it's just like, I wrote a story about
it's also like how hard when Ohio State and Alabama show up to say no. I mean, I've written about this, the number of draft picks they produce and the number of first rounders they produce. I mean, it almost doesn't matter where you are, that once they show up, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a legitimate story, and I think, maybe I'll do this. But is it possible that Ohio State and Alabama are ruining conferences? Like, is Alabama taking all the players out of Texas that it wants, making Texas and Oklahoma settle for the second-tier players, and then all the rest of the conference for the third and fourth and fifth-tier players? Is that hurting the Big 12? Is Alabama taking all the players? Well, I think they signed 6 out of the top 15 players out of Florida last year. Is that hurting all Florida schools?
Alabama's hurt Florida a lot.
Like, I think Alabama's hurting all 3 major Florida
Miami a ton. Yes,
schools,
absolutely.
And they've hurt the Texas and the Big 12, and Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and all the teams who are recruiting LA are directly hurting USC. And like the state of California and the state of Texas are similar, because those are the 2 states that prop up the entire conference. The entire state of Texas, for the most part, props up the Big 12. California does the Pac-12.
And that's probably the difference with the SEC and the Big 10 and the ACC. Is there's not just one source state that props it all up. Yeah. And I think,
when that state is rated by really good teams, then the best players that usually went to the USCs and the Oregons, not that they aren't, because they had a pretty good cycle in 2021, but for a while there, I think only like 30% of the 2020 class, 30% of the top 30 players nationally were from the Pac-12 footprint, and like only 3 of them went to a Pac-12 school.
Right.
And it's like, well, do you want to know why they're not making the playoff? Because all the best players in the Pac-12 footprint are playing at Alabama right now. And it's like, that can't happen.
It's the athletic equivalent of a brain drain, basically.
Right.
And
it is.
And this is, we're getting very off topic here, but I think because we're discussing the Pac-12, it's relevant. I think there's 3 schools that when they enter the recruiting fray, no matter where in the country it is, it's probably over if you aren't one of the 3. I'd say it's Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, that once they come into wherever you are and say, we like you, come play for us, I'm not sure anybody else has a chance at that point.
Yeah, and I don't really know who else you could even put in that position. You know, Georgia tries to do it, but Georgia's got all the talent it needs in the South. And I think Ohio State and Alabama are the 2 most national programs in the country. And
I think USC could do that in the Pete Carroll days. Like when USC...
USC's
USC
in Florida.
Would go into Florida. Yeah. They would, frost-proof Florida, Nikhil Roby. Hey, Nikhil Roby, you want to go play at USC? Yeah, sure. Let's go. I mean, come on.
I mean, honestly, I always think to myself, and maybe this is a cyclical answer or it changes, but if you were a 5-star quarterback and you could pick anywhere you wanted to go to school, like, how is USC not the answer? Like, I know it's not now because
it's pretty tough to say no to at any point.
Because I know that Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, these big time programs, especially Oklahoma with quarterback development, the most important thing to you is developing yourself into a draft pick, and maybe USC hasn't had the same momentum that it did during the Leinart years, in the Carson Palmer years. But going to Southern California and playing at USC, who I think have the coolest uniforms ever, by the beach, in that weather, in that state, in a place where stars are born, like what else would a young kid want? And I guess sitting on the bench at Alabama for 2 years or Ohio State for 2 years waiting for your turn is a better option for kids who just want to go get paid. But like in the day when USC was putting out quarterbacks and winning Heismans and putting them in the league, that was the most prestigious place. And it's like, to me, if I were a 5-star anything and USC came and I was in any state, anywhere, cold, hot, warm, whatever, why would LA, that's where I would want to be. Like, that's where people, where everybody goes to train for the combine. Everybody leaves their college and goes to Florida or
Phoenix,
California.
Scottsdale
Phoenix now.
Yeah. Let's not forget Scottsdale. We're gonna get to that in a second. Actually, okay. So I had Oregon number 2, Washington number 3. Are you that's you?
Those
two?
are the same. Yep.
Number 4 for me, and this is me sticking with what I said is the team with the linemen is the team that can win in the Pac-12. The place other than LA that has the best line of scrimmage players nearby is Utah. Metro Salt Lake City is a great place to recruit offensive and defensive linemen.
That's high for me.
The problem is they're not getting them.
Yeah. Utah, that's tough. We're going to stream at each other because I've got Utah a little bit further down the list.
Who do you have at 4?
Arizona State.
That's my number 5.
Arizona State should be a college football playoff contender.
Should be a powerhouse.
I yell about this every single year, and I don't get it. Like, Arizona State, I lived in Phoenix for the first half of my life, and I covered Ohio State for the second half of my life. Arizona State is Ohio State in the desert. It is a huge campus. It's got 60,000 undergraduate students. Its stadium is built into a freaking mountain. It's close to California. It's got climate. It's got everything. The uniforms are cool.
The Chuck box. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, they got Spinato's Pizza out there. I mean, it's like, what is going on? And like, Arizona State under Herm Edwards has done a really good job recruiting Southern California. But they are completely, and I don't say this nicely, inept is the word I would use when it comes to signing Arizona players. And guess what? With all these population booms, you know this as well as anybody, Valley of the Quarterbacks author, there is a ton of talent coming up in Arizona. Guess how many players Arizona State signed in last year's class out of Arizona in the top 50?
0.
Boom.
Oh, 0.
It might be,
wow.
It's boom, or unless it's 1, and there was it might be 1.
And especially the thing that really stands out now, and look, Jaden Daniels is a good quarterback. Now they got him out of Southern California, and you should be recruiting in Southern California. But the fact of the matter is, Phoenix disproportionately produces quarterbacks. It's not like they produce everything. They produce more quarterbacks than almost anywhere. I mean, Orange County, California, Houston, Dallas, that's pretty much it in terms of other places that produce a ton, maybe Atlanta, that produce a ton of quarterbacks.
Top 40 quarterback, Ty Thompson out of Gilbert, Mesquite, Oregon, 2021 class going to Oregon.
Oh, and
4-star offensive tackle.
Oregon.
Yep, and I think that's part of the reason why there was a transfer there. Number 2.
Tyler Shook, who's also from Phoenix, by the way.
Yeah. Brandon Walden, number 84 overall player in the country, offensive tackle, going to Oregon. 4-star athlete, Denzel Burke out of Scottsdale Saguaro, top 200 player, Ohio State.
Yep.
Oregon signed
Keely
3
Ringo
of
the year before goes to Georgia.
Yeah. In just this year's class, Oregon signed 3 of the top 5 players. Arizona State signed the number 15 player, and everybody else in the Pac-12 and Iowa State seems to be in there. If you go look at the 2020 class, Arizona had a ton of talent. Keely Ringo, Georgia. Bijan Robinson, who's going to win the Heisman at Texas one day, I think. Texas. Tosh Baker, top 100 player, Notre Dame. Lathan Ransom, who's going to be a starting safety at Ohio State as a sophomore next year, Ohio State. What's going on? Jack Miller, top 350 player nationally, lost rankings because he hurt his knee and hurt his shoulder or something in high school, didn't play enough, didn't have enough tape, fell in the rank, Ohio State. How are none of these players, none of them, and I'm not, none isn't a euphemism, like literally none of them are going. Why?
Right. And how can you not like walk around Arizona State's campus and not want to go there?
And I get it. Everybody who lives in Arizona is from somewhere else. I get it. They didn't grow up loving University or Arizona State University the way that a kid from Austin might have grown up loving Texas, or a kid from Columbus loves Ohio State. But to be a complete non-factor at the same time that you are also doing really well in California is like, you are so close to being really, really good. And they are missing the boat. And it's like this week, they signed a top 60 or got a commitment from a top 60 player in the 2022 class, which will be the 4th highest rated player to ever sign with Arizona State in the modern history of recruiting. The very same week, Ohio State comes in and gets a top 100 receiver. And it's just like, what? It's just like at the same time out of Arizona. So they go to California and get a top 60 player. 4 days later, the best player in Arizona maybe goes to Ohio State. Why?
I know, I think it's a combination of the things. Like you said, they didn't grow up rooting for Arizona State. But part of it is almost a self-defeating attitude, which I think the Herm staff has not taken that attitude. I think they're trying. But like the Sumlin staff at Arizona, it was almost like they weren't even trying for some of these guys. Like
3 of the top 5
you're 2 hours
players
away.
3 of the top 5 players in the 2022 class in the state of Arizona have already issued commitments. None are to to Arizona State.
Yeah.
It happens every year.
And maybe they want to go, but again, that's Ohio State. Now, what you should not be letting happen is Oregon come in. Oregon is great now, but they're not winning national titles at Oregon right now. Like Ohio State is putting the problem with that Herm and all of them are going to have to deal with is like Penei Sewell's going to go very high in this draft. A lot of Oregon players are going to be drafted pretty high. They're going to keep pumping them out, and then suddenly they're going to be like Ohio State and Alabama, and you got to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like if the window is closing.
Yeah.
It's like it's not going to get easier. It's only going to get harder.
So who'd you have at number 5?
This is when, can I just say I don't know?
you can. It gets hard. It gets hard after. Like I had a very distinct reason for where I put Utah. Arizona State, I feel like for the same reasons you have, should be a good job because you should be able to get some of those guys. And historically, they just haven't.
I defaulted with UCLA at 5.
I had UCLA 6th behind Arizona State.
Yeah. So, Utah's a little bit lower on my list than yours, but UCLA, Westwood. I mean, I don't know. Their facilities
you can get players there, but players got to get in, and that's with UCLA and Cal. That's a little bit harder than people understand because you're like, oh, they're state schools, but the way those particular state schools operate, you can't take. You're not dealing with as wide of a pool. It's not like recruiting to Stanford by any stretch, but it is not as easy as people think. Oh, you're in Westwood. You're in Beverly Hills. Everybody. No, it's not that easy.
Also, like the head coach there has kind of a leash, I think isn't under the same amount of pressure as Clay Helton is under, despite being rivals and despite being in the same city. I think that you have time there to potentially build, but proximity to players, cool uniforms. They play in an iconic stadium, even if that stadium's not on campus. There's a lot of stuff going on at UCLA. And if you go back in the last 10, 15 years, UCLA was signing top 15 classes every year, I mean, it's
some
not
of those
like that far
classes
removed.
Were fantastic.
I mean, it seems to me that they are probably underachieving right now from a recruiting standpoint. And everybody just says Chip Kelly doesn't care about stars, and Chip Kelly is a genius and is going to do what he wants to do to find players who fit the scheme that he wants to run and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, it worked. It worked at Oregon. And who am I to say Chip Kelly doesn't know what he's doing? But at a certain point, UCLA is going to have to sign a caliber of athlete that it's not signing right now in order to win the Pac-12. And I think that they're more than capable of doing it. It's just a matter of doing it. Resources, facilities, everything. It's all there for them. I mean, and when you start like differentiating between Stanford, Colorado, Arizona, Cal, Utah, it's like, which one of those would you just blindly take? I think UCLA would be my pick there.
All right. So you still haven't gotten to Utah. So you would be at number 7 right now.
I'm on 6.
You're on 6. Okay. Who's your number 6?
Yeah. Stanford.
See, I put Stanford further down because the pool of recruits is so small. It's the smallest pool of recruits of any school in the FBS. I think David Shaw has done an amazing job there.
I think that Stanford also gets you into the door with certain types of prospects that Stanford wouldn't usually have a chance at.
This is true. This is true, and I probably should have considered that. Okay, I'm going to flip. So I had Stanford at number 9. I'm going to flip them with Colorado and put them up on number 8. You're right about that because like if Stanford comes to one of my kids and offers them a full ride to Stanford, there's no question where the kid's going. Like they're going to Stanford.
Right.
So, like that's true. With a certain type of recruit, Stanford is the be all. Stanford is the Alabama for that type of player. That's what they want.
Exactly. And there's a lot of really, it's like, I think that people think that just because you're good at football means you can't be smart. Like,
I think there's more a lot of those people now than ever.
Yeah. I think that it seems to be more and more of a case of, well, he's picking between Florida State and Stanford is winning some of those sometimes. And it's like, as academics and all these types of things start to become increasingly more valuable, not that they haven't been before, but it just seems to me that there is some momentum there. And Stanford
like Stanford's not even the same league as the other FBS schools. Like Stanford, in terms of academic reputation, is on the same plane as Harvard and Yale. Like that's
right. It's like going to Harvard and playing in the Power 5.
Right. So I actually, you know what? I'm going to move them. I'm going to move them just behind UCLA in mine. Because you're right. You've talked me into this because it's funny because I've talked to coaches about this and I've written this and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me, but because I think, and I talked to Bronco Mendenhall about this a couple of years ago because he was saying that's one of the reasons why he went to Virginia because he felt like there was a shift in priorities in recruits that he had noticed and elite academics had become less of a crutch, like this is why we can't win, and more of a way to get guys to consider you. And I think, Stanford is above everyone else on that front. I mean, Duke's a great school. Notre Dame's a great school. Vanderbilt's a great school. But if you give an elite student a choice of all of those, they're going to Stanford.
And like Stanford just got a player from Michigan to prefer walk-on over scholarship offers from Vanderbilt because he wanted to go to Stanford so bad. And it's like that kid might actually turn out to be a starter for Stanford one day. And it's like only Stanford could
getting
do that.
into Stanford, because that means you got into Stanford. It's really hard to get into Stanford.
Yeah.
I mean, so
yeah,
that's the thing. And if that kid plays well, he may be on scholarship at Stanford in a year.
Right.
Which
exactly.
is going to be the best $40,000 his parents ever spent.
Yep. I agree with you. Well, you agree with me. I'm happy to change your mind.
Yeah, no, I've moved it up. So I've got Stanford right below UCLA now, just like you. I had Arizona under that.
So what number is that for you?
For me, that would be, well, now that we moved Stanford up, that would put Arizona, I believe, at number 8.
Okay, so I have Utah at 7, so not so much further below you, and then I have Arizona at 8 as well. Arizona isn't very good. Arizona should be better.
Yeah, correct. Tucson is 2 hours from Phoenix. It's not it's not a huge city, but it's a decent sized city. You're not that far from LA. You should be able to get players there from Phoenix, from California, and from Texas. There's enough that you should be able to field a competitive roster there.
Yeah, I know it's tough to get kids to visit, but I don't know. I've always thought this, like, what would I do? I went to school there. If you guys don't know, that's where I went to school. What would it take to get a 3-star defensive tackle from Pittsburgh to land in Tucson in November?
I think he'd be on board. Like the second he set foot on campus, he'd be on board.
They don't recruit the Midwest much. And to me, I feel like a lot of these Southwest schools like Arizona State and Arizona, if they had elite level recruiting guys in terms of analysis and breaking down and evaluating, couldn't recruit some of those Michigan State type players to those schools. And it's like last year, Arizona, you want to hear a stat?
Okay.
Arizona signed 0 players in their 2021 class. Kevin Sumlin's last class, or technically last class, he got fired before signing date, but 0 top 1,000 players in that class. 0. In an entire Power 5 recruiting class. You That's almost amazing. Have to try to be that bad. And I don't even want to get started on Arizona. You know, I mean, they can't recruit Arizona. They can't recruit Tucson. I went to Tucson a few years ago and wrote a story about Bijan Robinson when he was in high school and how the Sal Point Catholic high school that's 2.2 miles away from Arizona Stadium had 3 top 300 players and 2 top 100 players, and Kevin Sumlin never went over there, never drove his car over there. And the fun part is Kevin Sumlin's kid played on the team. That's how bad it was. I can't even imagine being that bad at recruiting or not trying. You know, being bad at recruiting and not trying are 2 separate things. So I don't know that I would have fallen in line with this Jed Fish hire, but we'll see how he does. They've already got 3, I think, top 1,000 players committed in 2022, so things are already improved. But Arizona is a great place to go to school. It's beautiful. The weather, for the most part, when you're in college, like in the sessions, is not blazing because it's always hottest in the summer. I studied for exams by the pool. My college experience was amazing. And the fans love, I mean, the stadium gets loud, it gets rowdy. Like, it shouldn't be the laughing stock of the Pac-12. I'm not saying it should go win a national championship, but like, something's really off there. And I don't know if it's the administration continually making the wrong hire, or if the support isn't there, or if they're hiring coaches, like I said, on the downturn and not the uptick. But they have no relationships or quality relationships to sign Arizona players, so they haven't done it. They don't recruit players in cold cities, and they're relying on the 9th-tier players in California and Texas, and that's just not going to get it done.
Ari, I don't think you're going to be solicited for any alumni donations anytime soon.
They always solicit me, and I will.
I think you should give them that speech when they call and they say, Mr. Wasserman, would you like to give some money to the University of Arizona? Bear down, buddy. I want you to give them that speech.
Yeah, I want to donate money so Kevin Sumlin can drive a Porsche, but never to the high school where the kids go to school.
All right. Colorado is next on my list. Who's next on your list?
Cal is next on my list.
Okay. I had Cal behind Colorado.
Yeah, and Colorado is directly after them. Colorado to me is interesting because it's just like, I'd like to hear your pitch. I love Colorado, like scenically, it's a beautiful place. I know Boulder's probably like apparently one of the most beautiful campuses in the country, but like, what's the plan there?
The plan there is just I would try to recruit, maybe not nationally, but California, Texas, Arizona. You're close enough to all of that to feel close, to feel like you're an easy flight away. And
where do you drive to?
Once you get there, you're there. Denver.
You can drive from LA to Tucson.
Oh, I know.
Where can you drive to Boulder?
You can drive to Boulder from Oklahoma City. You can drive to Boulder from Lubbock, from Amarillo.
Yeah. Yeah. Great drive, by the way. I highly recommend it. It's just, but I
also think you can go east and there would be people wanting to come to you.
And like Denver's actually had some pretty good talent. Like the Aurora area always seems to have talent. But I'm like looking at Denver on the map here, and it's like you are really the surrounding states. And I know they border with Oklahoma, the skinny part, and they border with Arizona, the Panhandle. Yeah, I'm an idiot. But there's no drivable city with talent. It's like Albuquerque is completely non-existent of high school football talent. They're bordering Utah, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico and Arizona.
We're heavily discounting Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Yeah.
As a talent
I don't
hotbed.
know. By the way, I've never been to Wyoming or Montana, and that's going to change this year. But nice. I also don't know if there's a single high school football player in either of those states that is recruitable.
I think you can get people to come there. I think you got to make it cool. Bill McCartney made it pretty cool, which is weird because that's not the guy you'd say.
Not Ralphie.
Ralphie. Bill McCartney's not the guy you'd think of when you think, oh, it made a program cool. But it was cool to go to Colorado back then. So I think you can do it. I just you've got to establish an identity. But that's a place people will want to come. Now, do they want to come there because of the weed? I don't know, but I think it's a place they want to come.
Because I have Cal ahead of them because Cal is a very highly thought of academic institution.
Academically elite, but the thing is...
It's in California.
Do they care? They do not care. They do not care about football. Now, Justin Wilcox cares deeply about football.
Yeah.
But the surrounding community does not care about football. And that is an issue. Yes, if you are academically elite and you want to go to Cal, by all means. But the thing is, you can that player can probably also go to UCLA and might be able to go to Stanford too. So they have options. They probably and they're also probably being recruited by Michigan, by Northwestern, by Virginia. So I mean, they have options there. And I don't know that Cal's the first option. It's not like Stanford, where if Stanford walks in and offers you, you're like, "Yep, I'm in."
No, I know. But when I was doing the list, I was trying to think to myself, okay, what's the plan? That's about the first question that I always ask. And I can identify a plan for Cal. I don't know what Colorado's plan is. Like if the plan is make it cool and hope people come, like that, I should lower them on my list.
It's actually happened before. They've done it.
I know, but Cal's gotten players. Cal had their best recruiting class in like 5 years in the past year. Like it's possible at Cal too.
And Cal had Aaron Rodgers and Marshawn Lynch, and I mean there've been some really good players there. So it just seems like it's a hard. Like I think Justin Wilcox is a really good coach, and I feel like he's done a good job there. I think Tedford for a period did a great job there. But it's not a place that you can win consistently because I don't think the administration is going to be behind you. I don't think you're going to get the kind of support you get at all these other schools that we've mentioned.
I think that's a fair point.
All right, we're boring Ari to death, which means it's time to get to the bottom two.
I stayed up till 4 a.m. last night playing Madden. That was a mistake.
Attaboy. Oh, it's an ultimate team or
online only, yelling at people through the microphone. And my girlfriend had a girls' night.
You're yelling you're yelling at 11-year-olds.
Yes.
My son was
not
probably
11.
one of the people you were yelling at.
The people on Madden are super angry. And that's like a case study for another day. But people say the most hurtful things on there. And it's just like, bro, we're playing a video game. But I don't get to play it very often. But when I do, like, it's like Vince Vaughn in The Breakup. Sometimes I just play the game and like 6 hours go by and I don't even know it. So we have 11 and 12?
We're going to say some horror. Well, there are horrible things. It's just these are hard jobs. Washington State, Oregon State. Pullman is hard to get to. Cool place once you get there. Hard to get to.
I didn't realize how far away Pullman was until recently from Seattle. Like, isn't it like 5 hours east?
I have driven it. It is 5 hours. Yes, it's a beautiful drive, but it's 5 hours.
It's like basically Montana, right?
Basically Idaho. You're actually
Idaho.
8 miles.
Sorry.
You're 8 miles from Moscow, Idaho. You can go to the Kibbe Dome if you want to see the Kibbe Dome.
What's the skinny part of Idaho called? Is that also a panhandle?
I don't know. It could be.
If you flip Idaho, it could be. I guess
pick it up that way. I guess.
Idaho looks like
better. If you're watching
tomahawk
this on
steak.
YouTube, it's a lot better than if you're just listening. But yes, Idaho does look like tomahawk steak. You're right about that. But
I didn't realize that. I forgot that Idaho goes up past. But yeah, it's basically up in Idaho, Montana, Yellowstone range. And
big sky country. Yeah.
I feel like that is what's the 3 most geographically unfortunate college football programs in the Power 5: Washington State, Syracuse, and maybe Oregon State.
See, but Oregon State isn't because Oregon is farther from what you'd call civilization than Oregon State is. You actually passed the turn to Corvallis on I-5 on your way to Eugene.
No, I know, but just because Oregon found a way to transcend the issue doesn't make their circumstance better. Like Oregon's geography is very unfortunate. They just were lucky enough to figure out a way to transcend.
You know who's a hell of a coach, Ari? Do you know who's a hell of a coach?
Who?
Jonathan Smith.
Yeah.
Jonathan Smith is doing a really good job in Oregon State.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm forgetting anybody in terms of unfortunate geography, but man, like Washington State, I mean, Mike Leach is a hell of a coach. And maybe his plan was better off in the Pac-12 than it is in the SEC, as we found out last year. But that team was in the top 10 of the playoff rankings multiple times in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And look at it on the map.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is, multiple people have won at Washington State. Mike Price won the league there.
Anybody who wins the league at Washington State deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Like,
that's got the Alabama job. It just never got to coach a game there.
Is that better?
Not the circumstances that saw him leave the job, but so yeah, I got Washington State 11, Oregon State 12. I only have Washington State at 11 because somebody's won there before. But yeah, Oregon State. I think Jonathan Smith is doing really well there. I know it's his alma mater. I don't know that you can long term expect any reasonable success, but I mean, they beat Oregon this year. They've got a puncher's chance in every game now, which is saying something.
Yeah, and they beat Oregon last year, so I mean that happened. I just feel bad because great coaches and great recruiting coordinators, despite the fact that they are really good at their job, have a hard time showcasing that ability because certain circumstances like really, really bad geography are just, unless you have, I don't even know what to recognize that.
I think smart people recognize that. Like if you see, like if there's a sudden uptick in recruiting at Syracuse, you're going to go, why is that? Who is that because of? And how do I hire that person?
Yeah, no, it's true. I like to think every single time we talk about a job, I like to think of myself wearing that team's polo, walking into and trying to think to myself, what would I demand first? And it's like, I don't even know what step one is in Oregon State.
The turnover chainsaw, getting to use it. That's step one.
You know what would be a good podcast maybe after we talk about basketball for an hour next week is ranking the last place teams in all of the conferences from best to worst.
Ooh. Kansas may have a new coach by then, so we may have an entirely different opinion.
Would you rather coach at Kansas or Oregon State?
Wow. That is a great question. That is a okay, I like this. We'll put a pin in this, as they say, Ari, because next week is Selection Sunday. We're going to give you the dumbasses guide to the NCAA tournament, and then we'll get back to the bread and butter, the football talk, with ranking the last place job in each conference, 1, 2. We could probably go 1 through 10. We could probably do the whole FBS if we wanted to. And would any Group of 5 job be above a Power 5 job in that case? That's a good question. That's my question. My question contribution to the show.
So
now we've got you salivating for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then maybe next week you can get some food back in this, because we just talked for an hour and 15 minutes. We didn't even talk about roller food.
Well, we had to do 2 conferences. Like it was very difficult. So
2 conferences.
We will do that next week. Dumbasses Guide to the NCAA tournament when Ari comes back. I will talk to you on Wednesday.